Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Everybody Hates Your Brand, the podcast for all things marketing and customer experience. Today, we have another special guest, Clint Bratton, Managing Director of Track Customer Marketing in Australia, which is part of the DDB Group. We talk about changing agency models, the impact of the pandemic, and the dangers of cookie-cutter agencies and client solutions. So, delighted to welcome to the podcast Clint Bratton. Clint, welcome.
Thanks, Rob. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you. We are in very different time zones, sort of made clear by the fact that you're drinking a beer and I'm having a cup of tea, but seems to be a bit unfair on me, but such is life. What we always do at the beginning of these podcasts is do a bit of a credibility section, a bit of telling the listeners who you are and your background and to be frank, why they should listen to you. So would you mind giving us a bit of a summary of your career to date and where you are now, please?
Sure, that seems like high pressure, why people would listen to me. I guess, firstly, yes, my name is Clint. I run Track as part of the DDB entity here in Australia. So we've got offices in Melbourne and Sydney. In addition to that, I juggle my duties, probably more so during COVID, as a parent, teacher, sports coach. But I think you're probably more interested in what I do professionally, so I'll try and stay on point. So, yes, essentially what I do now is what I've done all of my career, working in this industry now for close to 3 decades, which sounds an awful long time, during which I've worked exclusively in agencies and consultancies, both specialised and integrated into creative agencies. But I guess along that way, all the time I've been working with technology and data and using those as tools to build better, more meaningful communications for consumers and commercial value with that for clients. I'm a Kiwi. You might have noticed I still have some of that in my accent. But I've spent the latter half of my career here in Sydney, and I think, naturally being fortunate to work in this part of the world with some great clients, likes of Air New Zealand, Baker New Zealand, New Zealand Rugby Union early in my career, and McDonald's, Westpac, Volkswagen, Gumtree, Jenny Craig, BP, and Dulux. There are others as well that I'm working with now here in Australia. But over the years, Rob, this kind of industry that we work in has mutated a bit. So I think we used to be called direct marketers, loyalty marketers, digital marketers, customer experience. But I kind of think at its heart, it's all the same thing. It's about leveraging what's available from tech and data to build, I guess, better levels of service at a scale that's not humanly possible. And that probably brings me to where I am today. So for the past 3 years leading this team at Track, we have transformed into contemporary business that we define as PX, or personalised experience, as an agency. And what we do is we help clients to grow by making a positive impact to the way that they communicate with their customers. And I think it's fair to say our job is to help those consumers by giving them better messaging across all the channels, and really to give big brands the human touch, which goes missing from dealing with enterprises. So we'll design communications that those customers can show some demonstration of knowing and understanding them as an individual, a bit like, I guess, what they would have got in a village economy if they had have seen the same human serving them every day. Yeah. So we try and bring that to a big brand.
Interesting. PX, an interesting way of putting it and describing it. You talk about the kind of contemporary agency, which I think is an interesting choice of words. I think the agency model, it's things have changed a lot, and I think there's a lot of forces that are creating change. COVID, we'll come to COVID later because that's obviously been pretty seismic in lots of ways. But in terms of things like clients taking work in-house, large consulting firms moving into creative, from what I remember, I did actually sit through the Super Bowl until 3:30 in the morning as a huge NFL fan, and saw the Coinbase ad live, and that was Accenture, I think, was the people who created that one, for example. Things like people going away from retainers to project-based work and that kind of stuff. When you look at the kind of core impacts that you've seen over your agency's life, what are the big things and what's impacting you, COVID accepted, at Track, and what are those big sort of seismic changes that you're seeing that are impacting your business?
Yeah, Look, I don't think it's almost possible to answer that question without referencing COVID, because COVID sped some of that up. The big change has been how we work with clients. So I think agencies used to be this black box where the magic happened, and clients would throw briefs over into that box and expect a rabbit to pop out. Now the way we work with our clients is so different. So this is a change that's happened gradually, but if you think about the start of my career and where we are now, it's a totally different environment. So we're forming all the time agile teams that we're a part of and that our clients are a part of. So there is a lot of information and value exchange that happens through projects that we deliver together. We need to be dynamic. We know that the work that we do, our clients aren't going to work end to end with every department in our agency and everything that we offer. They will pick and choose what they feel is lacking inside their business. So I think we help them to get to a transformative position a lot faster by leveraging off the experience that our people have working with multiple clients and multiple systems and having a formula for getting it done. In short, the big change has been embracing an extension of our clients. We become an extension of our clients' team. And I think one of the key pieces of value that our clients get from working with us, or at least I hope a piece of value they get from us, is the capability that they receive from their team as a result of working with us. It allows them to then replicate that on ongoing projects, maybe with less help from the agency over time.
It's interesting because you talk about there's so much change, and now I'm back in an agency environment. What's really interesting is that a lot of it seems to be down to technology. A lot of it seems to be a lot of problems that people have is that clients have great intentions, buy a piece of kit, probably usually a very expensive piece of kit, with the best of intentions, but maybe didn't necessarily have the strategy figured out before they bought the piece of kit, and now they don't quite know what to do with said piece of kit.
Yeah, I think it's the same the world over. And when you're on the coal face of implementation of technology, you kind of think it's quite interesting how that technology is purchased in the first place, where people are essentially buying something without really knowing what they're going to implement. So I sort of often refer to a Steve Jobs quote. I think he said words to the effect of, you should imagine the experience first, then work back to the technology, and not the other way around. In the same vein, I read a McKinsey article last week that had this really great analogy of systems being like a gym membership. So that's an analogy I liked, because I think systems certainly are like a gym membership in that they give you capability, but they don't fulfill that experience out of the box. So the experience still needs to be imagined. It needs to be developed, executed, and honed, which is actually a lot of work. And having the system is just the start of the work. So just as you can't achieve fitness or weight loss with a gym membership, you can't actually realize experiential or commercial gain from from buying a system rather. And that's kind of where we come in as agencies and consultants, because we'll do the personal training or actually hit the treadmill to help truly realize the value of that system that's being purchased.
To take that analogy and probably stretch it far too thin, but we'll try anyway. I think the interesting thing there is you get from the gym what you put into it. So you could have the best personal trainer in the world, you could have the best gear in the world, the best kit in the world, but unless you as an individual put the time and the effort and more importantly the consistency behind it, you still won't be able to make it. So I think the point is, yes, have a great personal trainer like an agency to help you along, but as a client, you've got to be willing to put in the hard yards, if you like, and make the changes and make the sacrifices and do the things you need to do to get the most out of that thing. I think the inputs is a really important part of that equation as well.
I often use this phrase that we're mostly tasked with leveraging and intensifying the technology investments that our clients have already made.
Yeah, that's a very neat way of encapsulating it. Slightly more neat than where I was taking the gym metaphor. But anyway, I think what's interesting, we talked prior to the podcast, one thing we talk about from an agency perspective is homogeneity. A lot of, and I've spoken to other guests about this, but the idea that actually a lot of agencies, despite the workings of Byron Sharp and the idea of distinctiveness being a key element of brand growth, agencies seem to struggle with that a little bit. And there's a lot of homogeneity. They all do a lot of the similar things. They all say slightly similar things. They all have what they call proprietary models that kind of are the same thing, but tweaked a little bit. And one of the things we talked about was that idea of how do you make your agency distinctive? How do you make it different? And I think one of the things you were talking about was in terms of the people and how you hire those people and how you treat those people. Is that something? How do you want to sort of elaborate on that a little?
Yeah, I guess it's not just the people; it's the product and what you deliver as well, because the two are so related. My point of view on that would be that the industry has been guilty of, being cookie cutters of one another, and with that, the people become, like stock items on a shelf. So when you win a piece of business, you need more stock to service that. So you need to hire some people, and they're quite easily brought in and up to speed because essentially every agency is doing the same thing and following the same logic using the same kind of tools. And then, similarly, when you lose a piece of business, then people have to go. What I've kind of been working on and had, I think, some good success on is just changing the way that we operate as a business. So instead of doing customer journeys and personas as a starting point of a project and giving clients a really nice, customer journey map that they often put on the wall and then don't really act on, we're doing things that I think are quite sort of common sense, but quite different from that. So, I gave you this personalised experience PX piece that we're positioning as. And to take that a bit further, we think everything that we do should be driving a more human interaction. And the way to do that is to actually use individuals' data to drive the next conversation with them. That's understanding then that every journey for every customer is going to be somewhat different because nobody follows a linear journey and no two customers are the same. So I guess the three tenets that we stand up around building a seamless customer journey would be like a welcome experience. Then second and most critically would be an always-on segmentation and AI model, so that depending on how you've been behaving and interacting with a brand, it will dynamically change that next conversation that you're having. And that's quite exciting in itself because if you follow personas, you might have half a dozen different shapes of communication that you're sending across your base, but they don't really speak to the individual. So we're really referencing all the time transactions or observations that we've made in terms of the way that you're interacting with the brand. The other piece, which is really quite exciting creatively and allows us just to deliver a bit of spark, and I know what I call the win moments, is the unexpected. So much of what we receive as consumers has become cookie cutters of what other brands do, over UX, lacking in personality perhaps, and simplified by commonly occurring UX principles. It's kind of frictionless but meaningless. And to a degree, that's what the customer wants, so long as it's easy. But they don't want that all the time. What they want is brands that can respond with a bit of empathy to where they're at and observe, when they're in these critical moments. So this is kind of where the unexpected juice comes in for us. We actively chase data points that show, the consumer is either in a state of euphoria and a high, or at a low point. And our job as personalized experience agency is to amplify those highs and nullify the lows. And just by putting a framework in around that, we can identify the moments that really matter and are intuitive for us to speak to the consumer in a way that is human. So just as a shop assistant observes somebody looking at particular items and gives them sort of a helpful advice, we can do that based on the way people are behaving and interacting with the brand. So if we see someone's tried to change a password 4 times in one day, that probably tells us that they're not having a great experience. So how do we interact with them, understand them, and learn from them as well, so that we just don't get this wrong time and time again when other people fall into that trap. Equally, when people are in that euphoric state, how do we give them some tools to allow them to stay high or get higher on that moment, and share that. So creatively, it gives us some really good space to land on.
Yeah, I think the point you made that I really like, and something I've been banging on about for a while, is the idea of transparency in the communication. So why are we talking to you about this? So you talked about creating that thread from an action to a why. Now you've got to be careful you don't cross the creepy line. We were looking at your credit card records and noticed there's a limit to that sort of stuff. But I think the idea of being able to say to somebody, you did this. This is why we're talking to you about it. Absolutely makes sense to me, because then you're able to creatively go, well, the customer will then go, oh, okay, even if I don't want the thing that you're selling me right now, I get why you sent it me, and therefore I'm more likely to listen the next time you do come back and talk to me, because you're making the connections between the behavior and why you're putting something in front of somebody at an individual level. And I think that's something that I don't see enough, especially creatively. I don't see enough of that. Here's why we're talking to you. If you had to stand in front of somebody and said, why are you sending me this? And you said, well, you happen to be on our database and it was a sale. that's not a great answer, So I think that idea of the transparency, I think, is really interesting. And the point that you also made about, I always talk it as signal strength. What is that action telling me? And what are the other possible interpretations there could be? So how strong is that signal? So I always used to think, if I've clicked on a mortgage page on Westpac's thing, I could have done that by accident. I could have big thumbs, but if I go into a calculator and do something, well, that's a whole different level of intent. And I think the point hopefully I'm interpreting you correctly. The point that you're making is, how do you interpret those signals correctly so that you're judging where they are and the state they're in and all that kind of stuff, which I think is a really interesting, if difficult, I imagine, thing to try and accomplish.
Yeah, I don't think it's actually as difficult as people think it is, because technology and data systems have moved on so much that we can, quite easily build models to dynamically put content in places. What we can do now versus what we could even do 5 years ago is a million miles apart. Probably the big change on that has been, what are the signals that we're using? So I think we've matured as an industry so that we're not just looking at what's available from data providers and third-party data sources and trying to stitch that together with your existing customer records is kind of often what we used to do. Clients, or customers rather, in particular, have become more aware of how their data is used and what data they've provided to you. So, the battleground now is, how do we move away from reliance on third-party data to actually getting genuine zero-party data on the consumer. Yeah. And the only way to do that is to demonstrate reciprocity, so that that customer can see that they're getting a better service experience for providing that data. So, and I genuinely think that the more we can do that openly with the customer versus sort of creepy, even first-party data can be creepy, because hey, you're monitoring, what I've opened in my inbox and using that as, what you're driving as your next communication. Well, I don't think you've really consented to that anywhere. So I think brands now need to, live this promise in a way that they're, just talking openly to customers, getting those customers to provide progressively larger slices of their data, which is not really, data sounds like it's a bit of a dirty word, but really it's just we're learning more about you as an individual, so we can serve you better. So, some of that we actually just need to ask, and others, it's expected. So if it's expected in terms of, hey, what's your transactional history? What have you bought before? I think that's all fine, and we should be using those to drive the next best conversation with consumers. And if we don't know, we should just ask. And I think that's our responsibility as professionals to kind of advise our clients in that area so that we don't repeat the mistakes of our previous generation, which has been relying on other people to buy data on those customers from.
So, thinking about that kind of vision you created, the idea of PX, of a completely kind of one-to-one, flexible, reactive model. What are the things that stops that most often in your world? So, what are the biggest barriers? Is it having the right data in the right place with the right quality, the speed of that data? Is it technology? Is it cultural? What are the things that are you see at a client level that maybe are the things you have to work to break down?
I guess the biggest thing is actually just the standardized ways of working. So everyone starts a problem with, okay, well, let's build a customer journey map, and let's now building a linear customer journey that attaches to a persona type. But in reality, that never happens. That persona does not exist. We can't go and knock on his or her door and have a conversation with a persona type, but we can have a conversation with an individual. So that the biggest barrier is actually imagining what that experience looks like. Right. And as soon as we can, change the recipe that's attached to it, it becomes quite easy to solve. There are other hurdles on the way. I'm not going to be naive and say that data is not a problem. It's always a problem when there's not enough of it. But you find that if you dig around inside a client system, there are often silos of data that just haven't been pulled together, and they can be, and they provide quite a meaningful picture of what the consumer is doing, and then power some next best conversation around that. Alternatively, you go, well, just because you don't have the data now, it doesn't mean you can't have it in the future. So we need to build systems that are genuinely motivating to the consumer to give us some information, and they know then that they're going to receive a better service experience as a result of sharing that.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, it's interesting. I mean, one of the things you sort of slightly changing tack a little. One of the things you talked about, obviously, has been the pandemic. I swear to God, that word has been said so many times over the last 2 and a bit years, and it has been a force for very bad things, but it's been a force for change as well. Accelerating changes in customer behaviour, but also in sort of work culture. The shift to flexible working and all that kind of stuff. Like, how did you, as a leader, marketing leader, I guess, manage that from your agency perspective? How did you deal with that pandemic? And obviously, Australia's had a different experience to the US or to the UK or wherever it is. What are the things that you've tried to do to kind of keep your team coherent and together and keeping them engaged? What are the kind of things that you did or are doing in that world?
Yeah, I think it's been the same maybe for us as sort of everyone and every team around the world. So it's definitely been disruptive, and it's changed the way that we need to work. Well, it's changed actually the nature of the work even that we're doing for our clients. So it's been an interesting time, one, to be in an agency, and two, to manage a team. So I'll start with the agency piece. The impacts for us have been, some clients, so in the travel and tourism industries particularly, have been, obviously heavily impacted and wanted to immediately stop their spending. But at the other end, we've had, clients like Volkswagen and BP who have doubled down on their transformative projects to help increase their digital and contactless experiences. So there's been some good opportunity that's come from that. So for Volkswagen, we had to find ways of engaging audiences online and give them an alternative buying journey to the traditional car dealer. And that's meant quite a bit of work for us in terms of, changing the way that they're set up, collecting data, nurturing customers, and ultimately transacting via e-commerce. And then equally, if I think about BP, we launched for them a very large transformative project about the same day that the pandemic hit, which was BP Rewards and BP Me, which I think you also have those in the UK.
Yeah.
And for them, that's about both powering a contactless transaction and changing the customer experience. But most importantly, for the very first time, they actually now know the names of their customers and the frequency and cumulative value of those customers. And they've got their own channels, push notifications, and email where they can engage with fuel buyers as individuals. We were able to, not only start that loyalty program, but to accelerate its implementation during the pandemic. So I think that there's two things that happened. There was some clients that accelerated and escalated their process, and then others that put the brakes on for obvious reasons. So I guess overall that netted out for us. But then I think it was probably busier than ever because of change. So regardless of whether or not a client was doing more or less, they were changing what they were doing. And there was a lot of work that needed to be done around, how we manage projects and communicate that change across, various departments internally and suppliers down the line. So it meant, and we also had to do that remotely. So, at the beginning of the pandemic, I thought, maybe we wouldn't cope with that. But what this has shown is that we're bloody adaptable.
Yeah.
We had these initial moments of working from home where it was a bit of fun and novel, but quickly that became fatiguing, the Teams calls. So we found other ways of coming together and building culture. So Microsoft Teams became more than just the way that we talk about our projects. It became a bit of a social hub as well. We'd connect on projects daily, but then also come together on that forum for an end of week activity that was genuinely fun, where we were doing bingo and creative tasks, but also planning in our own way for the business in a nice collaborative way. So I think in reflection, I've probably now feel like I know my team and my clients better than I ever did because of the authenticity that's attached with that. So on video calls, we get to see what's going on inside other people's homes. I'm talking to you from my spare bedroom right now. We get to see dirty washing. We get to see disapproving partners, kids' tantrums, tradesmen working. I even saw an earthquake, and that was all part of our kind of video experiences. But kind of through that, I feel like I really got to know people in my team as people, and understood that each of them had quite a unique situation. And with that, some needed more support than others. So, at one end of the spectrum, we've got mums and dads who are working from home around a common kitchen table alongside their kids who have been homeschooled. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we've got, single people who are in their apartment quite lonely with no physical contact. So, like as a manager, you need to identify, different tactics for those people, see what sort of support they need. And it's very much a horses for courses approach. But overall, I feel like I know my team better and closer personally than I actually knew them in the office, where they kind of wear this veneer in terms of their professional environment.
It's funny. I've never heard anyone say that, and the more you say, the more true it feels. You're right. You're seeing into somebody's home, which is the most personal space you can be in. It's. I mean, I sit in my. We moved into this house about 4 months ago, so I sit in my study, and it's got Star Wars memorabilia and Chicago Bears helmets and God knows what else. So you could look at my back wall and kind of figure out, okay, well, he's a Nine Inch Nails fan. He likes the Chicago Bears and whatever. So you're right. It's an interesting perspective. I never really put it that way. And so I guess the last question, taking that kind of idea of what home working and in the office, what's the perspective from Track in terms of going forwards as we? I mean, I don't want to say the words post-pandemic because I don't think we're quite there yet. But moving forward, what's the mix? How are you going to play it in terms of office working from home? And has the last few years kind of changed your view on the validity of home working and how that can all sort of mesh together?
Yeah, I think, genuinely, my leadership style has changed a lot during the pandemic. And I'd hope that's the same for a lot of leaders. So for me, I've become more democratic. So we're, as a team, we share the problem. And then as a team, we sort of help with that solve. For me, that's been quite liberating. It's also helped that sort of closeness with the team. And I think within that, we are less worried about roles inside our business, and we're more what does the team need to achieve, and how can I turn up to help with that. And that's quite important from a working from home standpoint, because through that ability for people to go, this is what I'm good at, and I think I can make a contribution here. It's helped with the trust around having team members working from home, which I think it's the elephant in the room that people say, oh, I don't want to say that I didn't trust my team, but clearly some people don't, because this has become a problem. I think for us, we're quite lean and we're accountable to one another. So genuinely now, there's no question from any of us in the team that we're working and we're getting our work done. And that gives me a lot of confidence in terms of how we can continue to have flexibility. Maybe more so as well for the kind of people in our industry, Rob, where we're probably surrounded a lot more by introverts than other industries. We're working with data and technology folk, so they don't need to be energized by other people in a room. So I think that's just a nice side benefit for the kind of work that we do. I guess to answer your question, because I haven't answered it, our future is a mix of togetherness for collaboration, and at home in a bubble for focus tasks. So some roles need more focus than others, so they might be better off working more proportionally from home than those that need to work collaboratively. But I'll come round to that way I opened my answer, and that is, as a team, we democratically need to resolve how we're going to work. The conversations I've had with my team most recently is, we're likely to start with a 50-50 blend of being together in the office and then having flexibility. And some of our people will take that full half-time working from home, where others will choose to be in the office every day. But what we've identified has been important is the days that we are in the office and together are the days that we're all in the office and together, because we like coming together as a group. And I think even, we didn't realize how much we liked that until we actually were in that room again and saw the faces and, saw how much we could get from one another. So, there's definitely a mix as part of our future, and we'll continue to define and redefine that as the pandemic goes through, ultimately the next few phases, no doubt.
I think you made a really good point there about the sort of different people having different needs. I mean, and I think the idea of using when you are in the office, using it very specifically to do the collaborative stuff, because there's nothing worse than going into the office and sitting at your desk with your headphones in, working, because you could have done that. You know what I mean? What was the point? Why did I bother coming in at that point? So the idea of, but having said that, and having, run workshops recently, for example, for a client, there is no better way to do that than everyone being in a room at a whiteboard and scribbling stuff down and the ideas bouncing off each other. So I think you're hitting on the right approach. I think it seems a lot of agencies are kind of going that way, which I think is good to hear.
Probably one other piece would be a little policy that we've agreed on, which is an extension of the kind of flexibility and our trust in people's ability to get the job done working remotely. So we've got this working away policy that we're implementing, which allows our staff to work remotely for a couple of weeks in addition to their annual leave. And it's probably something that's more important on, just on the other side of the pandemic, recognizing that a lot of our people have family across the globe or interstate, and they haven't been able to see those family for some time. So in addition to the kind of annual leave entitlements, we're allowing those people to sort of tap on a couple of weeks so where they can work remotely. And the confidence that we have that will be effective, it has been driven by the technology changes and our comfort with connecting on Microsoft Teams and everything that's made our work effective during the pandemic. But it's a really cool initiative that allows people to, even take their kids across to the UK and get their kids nicely nested in with grandparents, and then they can do some work and then maybe have a week of leave on the other side of that. So, that's one thing that I think, we'll start with that with, the year of 2022. But my expectation is that's something that we'll be able to continue just to give people something more personally.
That is a really lovely idea and a really interesting initiative. I think it's if anybody else is listening who runs an agency, get on it. I think it's a great idea. Thank you very much for your time. It's been illuminating and certainly a lot of food for thought in that conversation. So thank you once again for coming on.
You're welcome. And anyone who is listening from the other side of the world that is interested in the sunshine and the kind of work that we do in Australia, feel free to hit me up.
And as I speak, as somebody who spent a lot of time in Sydney, I would jump on that when you can. Thank you very much. Well, hopefully you agree that was another fascinating interview and perspective with some interesting ideas in there. I especially love the idea of the 2 weeks working from anywhere as an addition to annual leave, especially because annual leave is nowhere near as good in Australia as it is in the UK, and I speak from experience. Don't get me started on the US. I hope you'll join us next time, and until then, take great care and be vigilant.